We are in the home stretch, folks. So we have talked about evolution as the first half of Unit 4. And for the second half of Unit 4, we're going to get into the other E of E&E, which is evolution and ecology. So Chapter 53 is about population ecology, but I want to also tell you a little bit about ecology as an introduction. So what you think of as ecology may be things like recycling and concern about endangered species and things like that. And that ties into what is the scientific definition of ecology. So one way of defining ecology is that it is the scientific study of the interactions between organisms and their environment. But another way to say that is that ecology is the scientific study of abundance and distribution of organisms. Why is it that we find the species that we do find around here in Alabama? And if we go somewhere else in the world, if we go to Canada or Mexico or Puerto Rico or anywhere else in the world, we're going to find a different suite of species. And why don't we find the same species everywhere? And ecology addresses some of that. So modern ecology includes both observational data and experimental data. And there are many different ways to consider ecology. Ecology is a huge field within biology. And ecologists can work at many different scales, from the organismal level all the way up to the planetary level. So we can see that there are, in this image, nesting scales of ecology. So at the global level, we can consider the ecology of the entire biosphere. We can look at broad swaths of the landscape, looking at satellite imagery. We can look at ecosystems, communities within ecosystems, populations of species within ecosystems, or just an individual species, and how organisms at the physiological level may interact with their environment. So in global ecology, the entire biosphere, the sum of all Earth's ecosystems, are considered. So the influence of energy and materials on organisms across the biosphere, how we look at carbon budgets and nitrogen and climate, how they affect organisms. This is the purview of global ecology. Landscape ecology looks at interconnected ecosystems. So we look at the exchange of energy, materials, and organisms across multiple ecosystems. So for example, here we've got a river that's flowing through the landscape. And you can see that along the edges of the river, there's a bit more vegetation, but as you get further away from the channel of the river, the vegetation changes. And you can see that you have the hint of water courses flowing as tributaries into this main channel here from the vegetation that's on there. So landscape ecologists look at how all of these different ecosystems function together. So an ecosystem is a community of organisms in an area. And ecosystem ecology looks at energy flow and chemical cycling just within a particular ecosystem. So not across the entire landscape, but maybe looking at interactions between plants and animals, microorganisms just within a particular environment. Community ecology is looking at groups of populations of different species in an area. So here we have just one type of plant community where you've got different species of trees and ferns and flowering plants all collected together. So we're looking at interspecific interactions between the species, and on the non-living components of these communities and how they affect the abundance and distribution of those particular species. In population ecology, which is the main focus of this chapter, we look at how individuals within a species relate to each other, and how the size of the population, the number of individuals in a population, may rise or fall, and the factors living and non-living that may determine that. We could even delve down deeper to the organismal level, looking at how anatomy, physiology, behavior affects a living organism. So physiological, evolutionary, behavioral, all of these play into organismal ecology. So as we can see again in this slide, it's kind of a nested approach. You can look at the very, very coarse scale, looking at the entire planet. You can look at the molecular and finer scales in organismal ecology. And we're just going to talk, for our purposes, and get our feet wet with the level of population ecology in this chapter, and in the next chapter, community ecology. So once again, what we need to talk about, what is a population? A population is a group of individuals of a single species living in the same general area. Usually, in the evolutionary sense, we say that a population includes the potential for members of this group of individuals to survive and reproduce together, that they are fit together. And what defines the boundaries of a population in an evolutionary context usually is how much gene flow is occurring within a population. But at the ecological level, we're concerned about other factors that might limit a population's size. We want to know about the density and dispersion of a particular population. So density is just like the physical property density. It's the number of individuals, or the mass of individuals per unit area or unit volume. So we could say, for example, in our classroom, we've got 270 odd students per classroom. Dispersion, however, is looking at not just how many individuals are present in a given area, but what's the pattern of spacing between the individuals in that area. So in many contexts, it's hard to know exactly how many individuals are in a population. So if you can't census the entire population, the next best thing you can do is to sample that population. And there are a number of techniques that have been employed by ecologists to estimate densities and population sizes. So if you were trying to estimate how many blades of grass are there on the field in Jordan-Hare Stadium, that would take you a very, very long time and be very difficult to do accurately. So maybe what you would do is calculate the entire area of the field in Jordan-Hare Stadium, and maybe just count the number of blades of grass or grass plants in a sample of that, a small subunit of that. Maybe you'll just look at a meter squared or a quarter meter squared, or look at a couple of quarter meter squares to estimate how much grass grows in a particular area and multiply that out to give you a reasonable estimate of the total population. But we can also do other things. For example, with animals that don't sit still for us, we can try something called a mark-recapture method. So how do we estimate population size using the mark-recapture method? Well, often what scientists will do is they'll set out some type of non-lethal trap to catch the organism of interest. This could be a pitfall trap. It could be there's a number of different types of traps that may be employed. And once you capture an organism, you can tag it in some way. Maybe you just want to take a photograph of it, like for example with different species of cetaceans, whales and dolphins, that have characteristic and unique fluke patterns. If you can photograph them, then you can effectively tag that organism. You know how to identify it in a future study. So you can capture, tag, and release a random sample of individuals, and however many you get, that gives you a figure S. Those are the number of organisms that you've sampled and have marked. And after some period of time, you go back and you take a second sample, call that N, and note how many of your marked individuals, how many of the individuals from your second sample are marked, and then you can estimate the population size, this uppercase N, by multiplying the number of sampled individuals times the number of individuals in your second sample divided by how many of them are marked. And as I said, that's something that's been done with a number of cetacean species like these Hector's dolphins here that have a unique fluke pattern, so they don't need to be captured and tagged. They're big critters, so you don't want to have to haul them up on a boat or look for a radio collar or something like that. So density, or how many organisms are in a given area, is going to be a factor of how individuals are added or removed to a population. So one way we can have that is through immigration and emigration, new individuals entering the area or leaving an area. But ultimately, the most typical way that individuals are added to or subtracted from an area are through birth and death. So we have a certain number of birds in a particular population. Maybe new birds are flying in from elsewhere. Other birds are flying away. But really the biggest contributors to most populations are the number of births and the number of deaths. So in addition to density, sometimes we're concerned about the patterns of dispersion. How are the organisms arranged within a given area? And patterns that affect that may be environmental and social factors. And we see three general patterns for dispersion: clumped, and random, and uniform. So in a clumped dispersion, which is the most common, you see patches of individuals. And this may be influenced by local resource availability or behavior. So here you can see here a bunch of starfishes that are all massed together on the same rock here, maybe because there's a rich food source underneath it. So you can see that if we looked at these dots as individuals, we can see, oh, there's a bunch here and a bunch there, and there's this clumping effect. Uniform dispersion is when organisms are pretty evenly mapped out throughout a particular area that they occupy. Like for example with these gulls, and you can see what's happening here is there's some territoriality where each gull occupies a particular amount of space that it protects, and it's the same amount of space that is protected by each gull, which ends up leading to this very uniform distribution. Random distribution, it's not clumped, it's not uniform, but you might have patches that look a little bit clumpy or a little bit more spread out, but there is no pattern. It's an absence of a pattern. And that can happen when stochastic factors or random factors affect the distribution. So in this field of dandelions that rely upon the wind to disseminate their seeds, there's not a real pattern to the wind that will lead to a pattern of growth of the new dandelions. So uniform dispersion is one in which individuals are evenly distributed. Territoriality often is the main factor in leading to a uniform dispersion pattern. In the absence of strong attractions or repulsions, or under the influence of random factors, dispersal factors, is going to lead to a random distribution of individuals.